Hello again, everyone. I'm Hal Levy at PYMNTS.com. I'm joined today by Dan Hanks, VP of Global Product Management at i2c, and we're happy to have you. Welcome.
Thanks, Hal. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. We're discussing credit self-issuance, why it matters now, where we might be headed, and what the benefits might be for a model like this. So I would wonder if you could give us a little bit of insight into really the concept and maybe the importance right now. When we're talking about credit self-issuance, I'm not sure if it's as visible to some of the, or as top of mind for some of the people who might be watching this, and maybe they don't necessarily know what it means to have a program like that in place. So I'd like to get a high-level view from you. What does it mean to have a credit self-issuance program when we are now in the midst of an environment such as the one we're in? What does it mean and why is it important?
Yeah, a couple of reasons. So just as a little bit of background, for smaller mid-size FIs, they can either self-issue, in which case they run a credit card program and take responsibility for the product, the revenues, and so forth, or you can work in an agent bank relationship. And there are large banks who will issue for hundreds of small banks. Tends to be more of a cookie cutter approach. The advantage for the smaller mid-size FI is you really don't have to take much responsibility of the program. So you get a card with your bank branding on it. You get to sell it to your customers, say through your branches or through other channels. But ultimately, the responsibility for managing the program, taking the risk, all of that is done by the partner. So that's been a popular model for a very long time. For smaller FIs that really feel like they can't self-issue, they don't have the resources to do it. But we're seeing that there are a number of downsides to it. And more of the small to mid-sized players are looking to self-issue. A couple of those things are, it's easier to be in the agent bank relationship, but you're giving up a lot of control. And they're definitely seeing the downsides of giving up that control. So, there are a couple of things. One, of course, you're giving up profitability. Credit cards are one of the most profitable products in a bank, and you're only getting a small piece of that. But even more so is the customer experience side. So, like I said, you get to put your bank branding on that plastic that goes to your bank customers. The downside is when you don't have control, you have no say over that customer experience. And there can be real downsides with that. I mean, that could be something as simple as, how long it takes to answer a phone call when someone calls up. When a customer gets, the card gets declined when they're out at dinner, right? Trying to escalate an issue. You have no say over that. But if there's a negative experience, it doesn't go to your partner bank. It goes to you, right? It's your brand that takes the hit. In fact, a big area we're seeing that also is in terms of underwriting, right? Because ultimately it's the partner who decides who gets a credit card, who's approved, who's declined, how much of a line they get. But the customer thinks it's you who's making that decision. And in many cases, we're seeing, the small to mid-sized banks can actually make better decisions because they have better data. To the partner, you're just a FICO score, maybe a few elements off a credit bureau, right? That's how they're decisioning you. But to the bank, they have more data. They know what your savings and checking account balances are. They've probably seen your direct deposits coming in from your paycheck for years. You might have had a longer history with them. They can incorporate all of that into a decision to potentially make a better decision. So, if your partner bank, let's say they say, we're not going to accept anyone under 680 FICO. Well, somebody applies with a 670, but they have 10,000 in deposits with you. They've been a customer with you for 20 years. They've had a great history with you. You'd want to say yes to that person. But in the agent bank relationship, you have no control. It's even a bigger issue on the small business side. Because, if that's a bad experience for the small business where they're declined, they might take that whole business somewhere else. And for these small and mid-sized FIs, the small business part is a huge part of their banking model.
You've given me some insight into some of the metrics that might be determinant as to really doing this in-house. Is it the case now that even these smaller FIs have the ways and means to use data and analytics to examine some of these, to your point, long-lived relationships, alternate metrics to start thinking about doing this rather than that hard and fast cutoff of, as you mentioned, 685, let's call it, right? Are they seeing maybe they have a little bit more insight, a little bit more granularity than they had before? And more than that, are we seeing a real change in their customer credit worthiness that really making them want to bring this in-house?
Yeah, and like I said, that's a really important point. And the data works in two ways, really. There are two advantages to the banks. One is you have more data and you can leverage it. And some of those data elements, like, I can tell from my own history, I've been in the bank issuing side, length of the tenure of the relationship of the customer with the bank, the amount of deposits they have on file with the bank, savings and checking. Those are huge drivers of riskiness. So, having a longer relationship, having more balances for a given FICO score, that customer is going to turn out to be much less risky. So having that is big. The other thing this gives you is once you have these cards out there, you're receiving the data on how these customers are behaving, right? So you know where they're spending. Maybe they're making large purchases, at certain types of stores, and you'd want to offer them an unsecured loan. Right? Maybe they're doing something where it looks like they might be a good customer based on this for a new, you see auto repairs, let's say. Maybe, and they're a good customer, maybe you want to offer them an auto loan for a new car and so forth. So the data works both ways. It's both making better decisions, but then going forward, having more insight into that relationship as you go.
Now, we both know that credit issuance is no longer just a matter of just having a card out there with a limit. Clearly, even the smaller players, when they set up a program like this, have got to be cognizant of what customers might expect because they have cards from other people, and they weigh the benefits against one another. So, what to your mind are some of the must-haves, table stakes for a credit issuance program, and some of the features that wind up being laddered on as time goes on?
Yeah, and that's interesting how it's changing. The first is rewards, right? That's your basic level. And one thing we see with like the small to mid-sized players, your customers tend to be loyal to you, right? They're banking with you for a reason. They probably like that local feel. They like that relationship. So you don't necessarily have to be the richest card in the market. You don't have to get in an arms race and try to, beat everything out that's out there. But you need to be competitive. You need to be close in that game. And, when you're in the agent bank relationship, you can only take whatever they give you. You might have a couple of choices of product. This lets you, have more flexibility about the reward level, reward redemption options, things like this. But, it's interesting you said table stakes. What we're also seeing is that things that were considered cutting edge just like 2 or 3 years ago are increasingly becoming table stakes, especially in terms of digital and mobile features. So one thing we see with the i2c platform, which has been very popular, is virtual card. So when a customer is approved for the card, the traditional way was you're approved, you'll get the plastic in the mail in 7 to 10 days, right? And then you try to get the customer to use it. With virtual card, as soon as the customer is approved, you can email them the card number to use immediately. We can also do push provisioning. So we can push it immediately into the wallets, Apple Wallet, Google Wallet, Samsung, those sort of things. So you get to the situation where literally a minute after the customer is approved, they can have the card in their Apple Watch and be making a purchase at the point of sale. Very popular, especially younger people, Gen Z, younger millennials, we're seeing this. And again, this was something which was really cutting edge, 2 or 3 years ago. It's increasingly becoming common now. And, in a year or two, you're going to see certainly all the big issuers using it who aren't already, and some of them already are. Those are the kind of things that you need to really keep up on to have a competitive product. The other thing we're seeing, which is very popular, tools around control. And again, especially with younger people, they want to feel like they have control of their finances. And that's one of the concerns of some of those segments, that like if I use credit card, it might get out of control. They'll just keep growing and growing, and I'll get buried under that. One thing we've seen is popular is buy now, pay later, BNPL, but tied to the credit card. So some of the big issuers, people might be familiar with Amex and Chase, both are very prominent products doing this. You use your credit card, normal transactions, earn your rewards, but then afterwards you're given a choice. Like certain transactions, usually larger transactions, you can move into an installment loan. And it could be a pay in 4 like that, but it could be longer. It could be a 12-month or 24-month loan. And what we're seeing are issuers are using that to give customers control over larger purchases. So let's say your refrigerator goes and you have to make a large purchase to buy a new one. You'd give the customer the option, make your purchase, then afterwards, and we do it right in our mobile app, you can move it into an installment loan that the issuer set up. Let's say it's 12 months at 9.9% interest. So now it's all optional, of course. And now, but many customers like that because now they know I'm putting it in this loan. In 12 months, I'm going to have it paid off. I know exactly what my payment is every month. I have control over this. And it's all tied into the same account. So you get one credit card statement, you get to see your normal transactions. Then at the bottom, you see your 12 installment payments coming each month. It's all consolidated into a single monthly payment for the customer. So very easy for them to use. But those tools around that, BNPL, card controls, card alerts, increasingly popular. And again, one of those things that are increasingly becoming table stakes.
I want to get into the mechanics of issuance because, doing it all in-house, there's a technical lift, there's a resource devotion that needs to go on. And I'd like to delve a little bit into the ways in which, and we'll talk here about the idea of building block, doing it in a platform setting, but one that actually makes it easier for these smaller FI. We both know a lot of the community banks, the credit unions, the merchants have their own operational pressures right now, right? Everybody has to do more with less, or alternatively, they have to devote resources to the pressures that are coming from outside their environment. And to do credit issuance, I guess, would be ambitious on a good day and difficult on a bad day. So take me through the way your own approach actually works here.
Sure. And just a little background for those who don't know, i2c is an issuer processor. We're considered a next generation issuer processor. So not like the people are very familiar with the legacy providers, your i2c's, Fiserv, FIS, and so forth. What next gen really means is, it's a much more modern tech stack, cloud-based. In fact, we run our own private cloud, API-driven. The advantages for the issuers are that it's fast and it's flexible. And that is really important and why we're well suited for the smaller and mid-sized banks that are looking to self-issue. Our platform is built around configuration, not coding, we like to say. So that means all the elements we're talking about here, and it could be rewards features, product features, all these extra elements, they're already built into the platform. And all you do is put them together to build a product. So for most clients, we don't require any coding before we get a new client up and running, which means we're much faster to launch. 3 months is typical compared to 9 to 12, say with the legacy providers. And then once it's up and running, it's much easier to manage and so forth. What it means is you don't need a huge team in-house to be able to do this as an issuer. You can leverage a lot of the resources you have. You probably have product people, risk people, compliance people, and so forth, that you can leverage your resources in-house with a more modern platform to be able to run it. The other thing that all the other things you need to run a credit card program, right? Credit card is at heart a scale business. You need scale to be able to get those economics, to be able to get that profitability that comes with credit cards. And that's always been a challenge because, the small issuers just can't get to that scale level. So that's really what we bring. We have scale. And so that's what we can leverage for the partner, for our clients. So it's things like call center, fraud, disputes, statementing. We run all of that for them. A full decision engine to do underwriting where the issuer sets their own rules, but we can manage it all for them. The other thing is we have white label mobile and web applications. So all the cutting edge features you'd find with your big players, your Amexes, Cap Ones, Cities, and so forth. We have clients who use it as a white label. We also provide everything via API. So if you have a bank app and you want this in your bank app, we can feed that right into it as well. That's a key part. All the things that you don't have to build in-house, basically you can outsource to us. And when we can run efficiently and at a good price because we have scale advantages, like a large issuer does. The only other thing I'd just mention here is, one thing with our platform is we also built in a number of tools to drive profitability. The one thing about credit card is, first thing is just, can you issue, right? All the things you need to do. But beyond that, to make cards profitable, you need to drive engagement. You need your card to be top of wallet. That should be the card that people pull out when they're at the store. It gets most of the spending, draws most of the interest income, and so forth. So we have tools like a communication manager, which is a trigger-based communication tool, onboarding strategies, engagement. You can regularly communicate across all channels: email, SMS, push notification. We have an offer module called digital coupons. So that could be, say, give 10% back your next purchase at Starbucks with automated fulfillment. So you don't need to integrate with the merchant. They go to Starbucks, they make a purchase for 10, they get 10% off instantly. You send them an SMS congratulating them. Things like that to stay engaged with customers are increasingly important. And those are things that we've built into the platform. Again, some processors don't do that, and they'll tell the clients, well, you have to go to a third party. But that's hard for these small and mid-sized FIs, right? They don't want to deal with 4 and 5 vendors. They really want one person, one group to be able to run this for them. And that's really what our platform can do. So that's why we've had quite a bit of success with some of the smaller issuers. And, we're seeing a lot of interest, even in some, tougher economic environments. They're seeing the opportunities, and that they can make that step. It's not as daunting a challenge as they might have initially thought.
I like that note there, that it need not be daunting. So last question for me. If we look at a few years from now, with all of the back and forth as smaller banks have been competing with larger banks for customer loyalty, I'm not just talking about deposits, I'm talking about all sorts of things. Would you suspect that self-issuance winds up being a strategic advantage for a forward-thinking smaller player, to the point where they actually get to leverage some of these community and personalization moments in ways that maybe the larger folks haven't been having to do? Would you suspect that issuance actually becomes not just part of what they do, but becomes, for the smaller players, a strategic advantage?
Oh, it absolutely can be. I mean, I use the example of 10% off at Starbucks, right? But if you're a local bank, you're in your community, that could be 10% off a local coffee shop who's competing with Starbucks, right? And you could make a deal with that local merchant to actually fund all of those rewards, those extra bonuses, to try to drive things. So it weighs, there are disadvantages to being smaller, but there are some advantages. And knowing your local community and the like is important. On the strategic side too, this also becomes important, more of a defensive measure too, on the strategic side, because you brought up a good point. You are competing with the national players, right? Even if you're a small bank, you're competing with Citibank and Cap One and Chase and all the others who are in there, and that can be a risk if those banks are also within your footprint. So let's say, pick a bank, Wells Fargo. Let's say they're trying to get their card into your customer's wallet, and if you don't have a competitive product, they do it. Well, if they have branches in your neighborhood, in your area, then what are they going to do next? They're going to start cross-selling. They'll start cross-selling checking and savings and auto loans. And if it's a business customer, definitely they'll be trying to take all that business volume from you as well. So having a good card in your wallet is not. There are definitely positive advantages to it, but even from a defensive, strategic point of view, you don't want to let another bank into that relationship. Right? If you have that relationship, checking, savings, other things, make sure you have your card in that wallet. And to make sure it's your card, it has to be a good competitive product.
I think strategically that's a good long-term roadmap. Dan, I want to thank you for the time. I want to thank you for the conversation.